everyone. I don't know why, but I seem to always be talking about composting. But I guess it's one of the things about being a gardener. So today, last weekend was one of those weekends it was time to dig out a compost bin and spread it around the garden. And as I was digging it out, there were a few things that were, residual in the compost. And I thought, oh, this would be probably pretty interesting to people to see. The reason I think it's interesting is that we're one of those families that believes that absolutely everything that has an organic base can be composted. So I guess what this is about is, can you actually compost anything with an organic base, or can't you? What's the result? So anything with an organic base means, apart from the very obvious, which is, kitchen scraps and, tissues, pieces of bits of cardboard and paper and stuff like that. They're the obvious ones, but we'll also throw in our bamboo and cotton buds, earbuds, old feather down quilt. We had one that just kept tearing, and I'd keep sewing it up and then it would tear somewhere else. The entire outside shell was just so weak that it was unsavable in the end, so I threw it on the compost. We throw on cotton clothing, any sort of natural fibre clothing, woolen, cotton, linen, even I'm just thinking, would I put on a pair of jeans? I wouldn't put on stretch jeans because I've seen an example of that from the compost. But look, anything that's basically made from a natural material. Straw hats, cotton socks, what else? We put on all sorts of, meat, cheese, all that stuff. I know some people say that you shouldn't compost them, but I just think, why wouldn't I? So we've got 3 beautiful compost bins in our garden. That allows us, actually we've got multiple forms of compost. We've also got compost bays, but that's where we put the bigger things. So the quilt and a lot of the clothing will go on there, along with all our garden cuttings and things. And then we've got the, the standard black bins with the lid. That's where all the kitchen scraps go, and the smaller items. Oh, another one I forgot is disposable cotton menstrual pads. Some of you might go, ew, that's disgusting. They've got blood on them, but honestly, I use blood and bone on the garden, and I know that blood is really good for compost, as is hair, fingernail clippings, all of that stuff. Anyway, never said it would be a beautiful conversation. So I'm going to show you some pictures about what the things were that we found in the compost that hadn't actually composted, and talk about each one. Okay, here we go. So here's the compost bin and my little black wheelie bin that I'm going to be digging everything out into. And as I do it, every scoop or two, I'm just looking through to see what I might find. And the first discovery is an interesting one. It's a wooden spoon. Now, wood is of course biodegradable over time, but it's not officially home compostable because it doesn't break down in the same composting time frame as food scraps would. And that's just because it's, it's a dense material. It's thick. It's like if you put scraps of branches and things in the compost, they might take a bit longer too. So we know this, but that doesn't stop us putting it in there, because I'm certainly not going to put it in landfill. So that sort of thing, we just chuck it, fish it out of the compost and chuck it back in for the next round. We know it's breaking down. The next item is a plastic stick from a cotton earbud. Now, like I said, we usually only ever use the bamboo and cotton ones, and there must be hundreds of them in this compost, and there's absolutely no sign of them. I thought the bamboo might take longer to break down, but it seems like it's gone pretty quick. It must be because it's so thin. But at one point we did inherit a box of plastic stemmed cotton buds, and obviously this is one that's ended up in the compost by mistake. All of the cotton's gone, of course, but the plastic stick is there for eternity. So that I'm going to take out. Okay, another thing that we found in there was one of those little soy sauce fishes that you get with sushi. And what I'm guessing is that someone's had sushi and chucked the bag into the compost and it's had one of them in it. Honestly, they should be banned. You really don't need them. And We should just be pouring the soy sauce on when we're there. Anyway, digging a bit deeper, here's another one, a little bit like the wooden spoon. It's a mango seed. Every December we buy mangoes as part of a mango fundraiser, and so we gorge on mangoes, and all the seeds go straight into the compost. I'm sure that most of us would know that they're not going to compost like food scraps. They're just too tough. However, they're still, to me, something that you chuck in the compost, and then I'm either going to just fish it out with the compost and put it in with the plants. It's just like having a rock in your garden soil, which doesn't bother me at all. Or I can put it back in the compost and just keep it going until it's gone, which might take a while, but that's all right. All right, now this green stuff, I was actually surprised by this, but this is the home compostable bin bags. Now, I thought they would compost at the same rate as the food scraps, but obviously they haven't. You can see it's really broken down. It's well on the way to being broken down, but it is still there. Mind you, every single, like, we collect our compost, our kitchen scraps in these bags, and everyone goes into the compost, and there aren't that many left. This is one that we found, so I'm guessing most of them are broken down more, some of them a little bit less. So again, at this point I could fish that out, or I can just chuck it back into the compost for the next round. I'm okay either way, really. I'd probably chuck it back. It's the best thing. Eggshells is another thing that we found. They just, again, they're organic, they will break down, they just need a bit more time because they're tough. I will either chuck them back in or put them into my garden beds, because like the mango stone and the, any piece of twig that I found in the compost, I'm really not bothered if there's eggshells in my garden beds. All right, the next picture, it took us ages to work out what this actually was, because it was extremely fibrous and all cut to a length. And we finally worked out it was the remains of palm leaf plates that we'd used and then composted. Now, palm leaf is obviously a biodegradable material, but as this shows, it doesn't break down very fast. And what we're thinking, we were really surprised by that, but we're thinking it must be a little bit like coconut husk that's very tough. It's an organic material, but very tough, and probably not very easy for microorganisms to get their teeth into, so to speak. So that particular material, I think most likely I would just I'd either pull it out and use it as mulch, because it will be beautiful for mulch and keeping the moisture in the earth, or I could just chuck it back in again and let it go a few more rounds, because it will break down in the end. But yeah, we were surprised how intact it still was. Now, the next thing that you can see is a bone. A lot of people don't put meat scraps into the compost, but we do. We just put everything in there. And of course, that's not going to break down. Again, it's like a rock or a stick or a mango seed. I'll just chuck that in the garden. Now, a really interesting one is the menstrual pads I was mentioning. We have for many years, there's quite a few women in this household, plus all their friends. So we do get quite a build-up of the disposable menstrual pads for those that use them. And we've always used Natracare, which are completely plastic free. And that's why we've used them, because we really like that. They have all gone into the compost and there's not one sign of them. It's all broken down into dirt. However, recently we started trialing another brand that we're selling at the shop too. It's called Suno Pads, and they're a social enterprise that gives 50% of their profits to education and support for women around the globe, particularly in the area of menstruation and menstrual health. Now, as a business and ethically, that's an amazing company. We weren't sure in terms of the compostability of the pads, because they are, what they say is they're packed in a biodegradable plastic sleeve. And biodegradable, if you've watched some of my other some of my other YouTubes, you'll know that it's a bit of an ambiguous term. It means that it will break down eventually into organic matter, but it doesn't give any time frame. And you can see from these two pictures, the first one is the wrapper from a pad, and from what I can see, there's not one tiny bit of breakdown has occurred. It's like I put a plastic wrapper into the compost. And the second picture is the remains of the pad itself. You can see that the bulk of it has composted, and what's left is the little absorbent rectangular bit from it, and the inside of it has composted. Well, it started composting okay, but because it's sheathed in this biodegradable plastic sheath, that has stopped it breaking down further. So to me, that's probably not going to be something I'll be going on with in terms of compostability. But as I always say, there's many ways to choose what you want. So for me, I do really want a compostable item, but for other people, the idea of the social enterprise and giving the profits back to women's education across the world is more important, and that's absolutely fine. Last but not least, actually second last, is all the clothing that I talked about us putting in there. What happens to it? Well, a lot of it breaks down, but you'll find that you're left with synthetic thread. So this might have been what on a hat, for example, might have sewn the brim together, or the headband onto it. You might end up with just the headband and some thread. Or it might be from a piece of clothing, because even if the clothing is cotton, the thread is likely not going to be. That is one of the annoying things that you find in your compost, because you end up with these synthetic threads that you have to fish out. And a really good example of this is my last picture, and that is, I don't know if you can see, but that was a pair of pants that was thrown into the compost, and all of it has broken down and turned into dirt, basically, except for the band, the zip, and the inside pockets that must have been made from a synthetic material. But I love how all the rest of it has just disappeared. It's like it's melted off the pants, and all that's left is the inside. So that's what you might find if you run a compost that you put absolutely everything into. It's not perfect, and yes, you do get, little bits of plastic or things that haven't broken down properly that you might want to fish out, but I'm not about perfection. I'm about just composting as much as possible, and I don't mind fishing things out now and then. Anyway, hope you found this interesting, and I hope that you might decide to compost pretty much everything that you possibly can.